That's me. I'm like, chill, baby. I got places to go, people to see.
Yeah, for real.
I gotta go see Cabin Daddy. What's up?
So glad you're joining us. We've been waiting for you.
So why are we not getting this again? Because they said it's not going to come out.
Okay, so
I guess this was the storyline.
We've gotten off subject a few times, but yeah. So the Cabin Daddy special. So, and I am probably going to make a video about this too, but we'll kind of talk about it a little bit here. So the exactly. So the Cabin Daddy special was an episode from season 2, basically. So the Yellowjackets seasons have been having 10 episodes. Season 2 had 9 episodes. So there was this rumored, basically confirmed 10th episode that was supposed to air between seasons 2 and 3. And this was known as the Cabin Daddy special because there was like a couple of photos that leaked out, and it was Jason Ritter who was playing Cabin Daddy. He was wearing the jacket and he had a baby. Jason Ritter is the husband of Melanie Lynskey, and he's also an actor as well, so you're probably familiar with him. But so this episode was made, and we were all really looking forward to it. And even Ashley Lyle, she acknowledged it on Twitter a couple of times. And she said that, yes, it would be something that would be coming out before season 3. Well, we never got it. And so from what we hear, and again, this is Ash Silver, she has some connections behind the scenes with writers or, something that this is allegedly, but the episode itself is not going to air because I guess the Paramount executives just didn't like it at all, which is kind of like such a weird reason. But there was this merger that happened, of course, with Showtime and Paramount after season 2. So there was kind of a lot of changes that happened. So there is the chance, that maybe that is the case. Now, what we hear, so what Ash relayed in her video about yes, and I am very disappointed it won't be shown either, because I think it sounds like it would have a lot of crucial information. And one of the things is, a lot of the details that happen in that tie into little details that have happened in the series, and especially in season 2, including things with like Shauna and her baby, and that sort of thing. So basically what we learned is going to happen in the Cabin Daddy special was that it was about, obviously, Cabin Daddy and Cabin Mommy, his wife. So it's about a man, and he is married, and the couple, they go out to stay at the cabin. It's unclear now, and I'm relaying these details, but it's unclear, was the cabin already there, or was the cabin something that they built when they got there? I'm inclined to think the cabin was already there, because one of the details that we learn is that Cabin Mommy is pregnant while she's out there, and she has a baby while she's out there. And she is also a writer. And so that is like the whole reason they go out there, is so that she can, kind of get away from the hustle and bustle of the city, and they can relax and they can work on the novel. So again, I'm assuming the cabin was already out there, because as a pregnant woman or as a writer who is going to work on a writing project, you're probably not just going to go out into the middle of the woods in the Canadian wilderness and have your husband build you a cabin so that you can write a book. Presumably the cabin was already there, but we don't have those details specifically. These are just little things that were in my mind as I was listening to Ash's description of this.
Idealistically, the cabin could be the portal for Baal and your worship and your child sacrifices. That's what I'm hearing.
So yes. In my mind. Yep. So yeah. So as they are there, and another thing that happens too is, so when Javi went missing, and then he had a friend, when he came back, he said, she told me not to come back to the cabin. And so we all were like, who is she? And then in season 3, we also have that kind of moment where Coach Ben seems like he's talking to someone while they're down in the caves. So And when Javi had his drawings, a lot of people thought that in that one drawing that he had done, where there's a lot of like roots of the tree, that it almost looked like there was like a woman in the roots of the tree. And so, we've done a lot of speculating about this. Is there a woman? Does he, did Javi have a friend? Is there like somebody that's in the caves? Is this just like a figment of their imagination or a hallucination, potentially from the gases? Who knows? We're not exactly sure. But apparently, in the Cabin Daddy special also, so Cabin Mommy starts seeing a little girl. And this little girl, okay, so this is what's interesting. So Ash reported that the girl that's playing the little girl, her name is Brooklyn Prince, I want to say. I don't know where it is in my notes. But anyways, Brooklyn Prince. She was in a movie called The Florida Project, I want to say. And what's really interesting about that little girl, to me, this was my interpretation when she said this, was actually the first thing that popped in my mind, was that little girl looks like young Lottie. That looks like the little girl that played Lottie when she's a child. And so my thoughts are like, is this somehow like connecting to Lottie, because Lottie is so connected to the wilderness, and she's always kind of had this intuitive sort of connection. Even as a child, we saw her having that. And so is there some sort, did they cast that girl specifically because she kind of looks like Lottie, and like maybe we're supposed to make some connections there? I don't know, but it was just something that stuck out in my mind. These are just kind of like, questions we're going to have to ponder over, because we're not going to see the special according to our, according to the sources.
Like the winds of winter.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. Yeah, so kind of interesting. And then of course, so Cabin Mommy, she sees this little girl. I think the little girl like keeps coming to her. We don't know exactly like what their dynamic is, or if she's like, oh, we need to like help this girl, or maybe the little girl is like, you shouldn't be at the cabin. Maybe she's trying to like get them away. And we don't know where she comes from, if she's a figment of someone's imagination. Is she like some sort of fey creature or something like that? A she, as we kind of speculated in my Mari video, like the she fey. And so, because he says she told me not to go back, so is she like the she? It's a possibility. I mean, it's really unclear. And also it's unclear if that little girl, if she also aged at all in that time, because if she ages like a normal progression of time by the time the girls got out there, because, and we've kind of talked about this, because of the plane. We're flying. Come on, she's doing it. I did a little research on the planes, like the one plane that was out there in the wilderness already, the one that Laura Lee crashed, or not crashed, but blew up. And we kind of speculated, I think it was from the 70s, that plane. So maybe Cabin Daddy, Cabin Mommy, they flew there in the plane probably in the 70s, because that is kind of the dating of that plane. And then the girls would be out there in the 90s, so like 20, 25 years later. So would the little girl, did she age as like a natural progression of time? And is this like now an adult person? Because kind of the drawing in Javi's, like in the tree roots, Javi's drawing did kind of look more like a woman than a little girl, or like the figure of a woman versus a child. So a lot of questions kind of adding up here, but we don't exactly know like what her intention was, or what she was trying to do with Cabin Mommy, or like, is she trying to lure her away and say, oh, the cabin is dangerous? Because that's what I was thinking too, Mandy, is that maybe she's there to say like, is this cabin a
portal?
Mm-hmm. Like some sort of source of evil, or a, so then it's going to go further. So when she was talking about this, in my mind, I was thinking, hang on, I'll pull up a picture. How do I do this? Sorry, I'm a little rusty. Okay.
I mean, I would like to know like what the exact coordinates on the grid for the cabin were. Like, you know what I mean?
Oh yeah.
Like that could be because they have all these really creepy places and things that they say are like, you know, just how they have for the summer solstice where people go where they're like there are higher places created more divine energy like the pyramids or things like that.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I mean, it could be the mother too, like, you know, because like when you give your children, you don't know what you're giving up. Like you are giving your soul, part of your soul to it.
Mm-hmm. So I was thinking when we're kind of hearing about this, and then with, you know, with the little girl kind of included in the idea, what came to my mind was The Shining.
Here's Johnny.
And The Shining is, you know, takes place at the Overlook Hotel, which is like basically the hotel itself is like this source of evil, right? It's like a corrupting force, and it feeds on the Shining or the Shine or whatever, which is basically like this psychic ability, but it's also like a, you know, kind of related to like being like a pure, you know, a pure source, because it's like his son, I think Jack's son in The Shining has the shine because he's in the next movie, Dr. Sleep, right? I'm not like totally well versed on The Shining, but I did see Dr. Sleep like when that one came out. But anyhow, and
Well,
that was a really good one.
they
And it has,
say, I mean, haunted houses, objects, mirrors. There's so many things that, like, in the occult and witchcraft, you can use to put spells on jars. You know, all those jars we found, the liquor bottle, why it was held in a bottle under the stairs. The stairs are the highway, like you can get stairs to heaven or stairs to a different zone. There's like that weird show, I think I don't remember what it was, but like where there's like a stairs in the middle of the woods and then they end up like walking into it and then they enter another realm. Anybody know what I'm talking about? It's yeah, there's a lot of that stuff and it gets carried and energy gets carried through
mm-hmm.
objects and people and places. And you know, especially like think about, you know, graveyards or like just Gettysburg, for example, you know, or if we go to Washington DC and you see all of the stuff there and the monuments and whatever, like, and it does
Yeah.
make a person go crazy.
Yeah. I mean, and it's like, yeah, I don't know what the source of like this. I mean, I'm sure there's people who are way more into Stephen King who can explain what the source of the evil at the hotel is, but it's a really interesting concept because Yellowjackets kind of explores this same theme. And then the Cabin Daddy special with Cabin Mommy being the writer, which just like in The Shining, Jack was a writer. They went to the hotel so he could focus on his writing, and it's him, his wife, and his child. And the hotel sort of slowly drives him crazy and turns him into like, it basically corrupts him, turns him into like a violent psycho, and he like attacks his family, right? And so it's kind of the same with the Cabin Daddy special. So Cabin Mommy, she slowly starts deteriorating and she starts kind of losing her mind, and she has the baby out in the cabin, but the baby's really colicky, is kind of from what I understand, and he's crying a lot. And this is actually supposed to connect to Shauna's Shauna's sort of monologue that she has, or basically after she has the baby and she's sitting there and she's like, can't you hear him crying? Why is he crying? And it was supposed to connect to the Cabin Daddy special and that part. So Cabin Mommy, she's kind of
So
slowly losing
sad.
her mind. I know, I hate that part. I can't even watch Q.
And
Like,
and
it's just,
postpartum depression, and this happens a
yeah.
lot of times. And
Yeah. And that's what
yeah,
happens out with Cabin Mommy. She unfortunately, like, she has postpartum depression, and the crying of the baby and the isolation, all of those things, you know, just compounding. And so she ends up And this is where it's, I guess, kind of left a little ambiguous, where the baby is killed, but it's unclear if it's sort of if it's a sacrifice to the wilderness or if it's just, madness from the mother. But she also takes her own life. And then, so Cabin Daddy, and I think he's gone when that happened. He was out hunting or what have you. And he comes back and he finds this terrible scene of his wife and his child. And so he ends up taking his own life, which kind of makes sense too now looking back, because like, think about the state of the cabin when the girls went in there. They found like there was like food at the table. There was like a plate of food at the table. There was still a few cans of food in the pantry, and then
I mean,
but
the porn though and all that stuff. Like, I mean, if that was how he was alive, I mean, if that's the kind of guy you're married to, and
yeah, I mean,
and you're pregnant, you just have a baby, and I mean, I can only just see more abuse situations in there.
And maybe it was exploring kind of that duality, like of like, was this even like a happy, situation that she was in, or was she extremely isolated? And that's kind of like,
she was isolated, and I mean, isolation is one of the leading causes of suicide, and especially postpartum depression. It's very real.
Yeah. Oh, okay. So Wild Marjoram said there was a quote from Bart, I think, saying the bonus episode had a Shining vibe, which, yeah. So, I mean, based on what Ash relayed to us, that was literally just exactly what went in my mind. I was like, this sounds like an inversion of the Shining, where it's the mother who is the one who's losing her mind versus the Shining where it was the father losing his mind.
And in the 70s, it was very much that was the role. The gender roles were a lot more specific, and having to take care of all of that and being so depressed and just all those emotions are like flooding me personally right now thinking about it. But also just, I want to share those because it could have been him just coming back and like, the baby's not crying, he's mad, he's hungry, he's wanted to hunt something. He didn't catch anything to hunt because we already know it's hard to find food up there. And it's clearly shown. I mean, he could have just like hurt the baby and then the mom killed herself too. I mean, it could have been a lot of scenarios. That could be probably why the show Paramount didn't want to show something like that either. It's very touching.
Yeah. I mean, I guess compounded with the loss of Shauna's baby, but it is kind of, I have my questions as to why they wouldn't want to air it, because I mean, maybe they felt it was too close to The Shining, or maybe it wasn't. I don't know.
Or it just didn't fit their new narrative, like how they cut off the other characters.
But what's really interesting too that I noticed about this, I mean, obviously this picture right here this is, spoilers. That's how Jack dies. But it was very reminiscent to me of Jackie, and it's Jack and Jackie, Jack Torrance and Jackie Taylor. And then we were kind of talking about it. I posted this up on my community tab the other day, and we were kind of like commenting about it. And it's like, this seems like it's actually kind of a running theme under the trope of Jack Frost. A lot of these like Frozen characters are named Jack. And so there's kind of like a running theme going on. I think it was Titanic. Somebody mentioned Titanic with Jack Dawson. There's a couple of other ones, but I just think it's kind of funny and kind of clever that maybe this is like a new trope that we're seeing. But of course, Jackie is like the feminine inversion of it, which is great. Thank you, Yellowjackets, for that.
we need JTT for, or Jonathan Taylor. JTT. We need JTT in Wildjackets. Why has he not come back?
Yes. Actually, I would not complain. I loved JTT growing up. That was my guy.
I mean, he's no hobbit, but yeah.
Travis, spill blood. Gather some things that you can find. Anything. Look at me, Shauna, breathe.
So the other thing that came to mind when talking about this topic, hold on, I want to pull up a picture. Here it is. Perfect. I do have it. Okay, so now, along with this, so actually, somebody on Twitter pointed out, or X, excuse me, that that Lottie. So they had a picture, this photo, and then the picture of Lottie when the cabin was burning down right next to each other. And I guess Lottie was like kind of laughing maniacally while the cabin was burning down. Okay. And this shot was from the season 3 finale where she's kind of having that like antler queen moment, right? Somebody posted on Twitter those two photos next to each other and they're like, oh, she definitely burned the cabin down. And I was like, actually, like, even though I hadn't really, yes, exactly, comment DZR. I'm never gonna figure out how to say your name, so
Lottie. Lottie.
yeah, so Lottie as a potential person who burned the cabin down. We've talked about Thaisa, and actually what's really interesting is Steven Kruger, who plays Coach Ben, did an interview recently where he said in the interview that he thinks Coach Ben actually did burn the cabin down. He's like, I just think it would be way more interesting that way. I still don't believe that Coach Ben did it, but I kind of believe that Lottie did now. I kind of am inclined to think that maybe Lottie did because, like, let's think about it. Like, when they first went to the cabin, when they first found the cabin, and Lottie was like really hesitant. She didn't want to go in there. And then later that night, when everyone was kind of going to sleep, remember Lottie was sitting outside and Thaisa comes out and Lottie's like, I just have a bad feeling about this place. I think something bad happened here. And Thais is like, you don't believe that? Come inside. And then like later, Ty wakes up and she goes up and she finds Lottie upstairs in the cabin, sitting there with dead cabin guy, just sitting there.
Lottie. I told you.
Which is like, why didn't you guys check the attic before you all went to sleep in the cabin? But that's, a question for another day, I suppose.
She could have been like possessed with dead cabin guy trying to kill more women and babies. So
yeah,
that could be another story. But I do like the idea of that so much because it also plays into like some sort of like religious fanatic thing, so that she only depends on the wilderness, and wilderness will give us.
And also like, okay, so she didn't like the cabin, like from the gate. She was like, this place, something bad happened here. So like, it kind of makes sense, like, especially because, yeah, she buys into the wilderness, and the wilderness is not the cabin. The cabin is a place in the wilderness. And so she's all interesting of the wilderness and its vibes and the wind and, the little things like that happen. But also, like I said, with the Cabin Daddy special, that little girl that they cast looks a lot like the little girl that played Lottie. And so I do wonder if Lottie is somehow more connected to this than like we can even realize or recognize without that piece of information, because I feel like Cabin Daddy special has some extremely crucial information embedded into it that unfortunately we may never get to see. But if that is the case, like if Lottie is somehow connected to that little girl, like it just kind of, the plot thickens even more.
I won't be well. I won't be me. The me that was made out here.
Here we were hoping we would get like a Cabin Daddy Christmas episode. And it's like literally the complete opposite of everything that we thought.
Yeah, well, I kind of like they're keeping the mystery alive. Like this is kind of like, okay, now we're getting to theorize. We're getting to like, there's no clear answer. Like they didn't give us that answer. And a lot of people were like, I think even people like when we were live streaming about it during the season, people were like, well, who do you think did it? And I think I even said, I don't even think it's important at this point, but that, I was an idiot. Like, it is important, and it's just kind of fun to speculate over. The mystery is alive.
Yeah, I mean, and so is the wilderness, and so is, everything will always be changing. And I don't think that they're gonna give us all the answers we want, period. I think it's just gonna leave it to mystery, which is like kind of the point, right?
Mm-hmm.
The mystery of life and wilderness and all this stuff. Yeah, I
I'll
like
show you
this. Like
guys. Oh,
the
God.
circle's like a third eye, and the hook covers her mouth. Then
Yeah,
the silencing of her mouth during
I'll
like
show
the
you guys
possession.
this. Here, let me
Wait,
see.
we see her get possessed though too during the seance.
What's that? French? Since when does Lottie speak French?
Yeah,
She starts speaking French and like she becomes someone else. So it could as well have been Cabin Daddy possessing her.
let me share.
I love this idea. Definitely need to make a video.
So this was another thing that I made just when I was like when I was just I was on the Play-Doh. I was down the Play-Doh rabbit hole with like the cave, the allegory of the cave and the allegory of the sun. And this was like, I don't know, I was just messing around, but like basically so if you're familiar with Play-Doh and like the allegories, yeah. So, or the Republic, Plato's Republic. So this is, the sun, and then the cave, and then the dividing line, and then the ship of state, which is just like the whole establishment or like the government of it all. And what does Van say? Actually, now that we're saying it, Van says this place doesn't like to be governed. No, you can't govern this place or something like that. So if the ship of state was the cabin, as like the government, as like a governing, like, a place of an established like government building or something of that, to the wilderness, from the wilderness's perspective, then you could see like burning it down because the wilderness doesn't want to be governed.
And Shauna Shipman also though wanting to take State of the Queen, and she divides the team.
I was journaling.
What were you journaling about?
Objection. Who cares what she was journaling about?
Sustained. Misty, why does it matter what she's...
Because she could have been journaling about starting the fire.
And Lottie wants to go back to the cave too. I mean, and maybe the cave has a whole new symbolization too, other than what we had thought. I mean, it can play out a whole lot of other stuff if we're going to include. But we have talked about this before. We have definitely allegoried the allegory. Is that right? Yeah. So, but yes, this is giving me things in my mind.
There's a what account is it? I think I shared a thing. It's AK Cabs. It's AKCABZ on Twitter, on X. I think I shared one of they do a lot of graphs. They're like, I thought we were into the graphs like this, and they did one. I shared it in my, what was it? I thought
we were Xing X's today. Okay.
Indeed. It's an X kind of day.
Yeah.
It's the dividing line.
Here, this will help.